It's my pleasure to serve as a host for this event. For those of you who are already involved in the Music XT community, welcome back. And it's good to see some familiar faces also. That's great. I see many new faces here. Some people are not on camera, but I see some new faces. And I would like to extend a special welcome to those who are curious about Dalcroze practice and Music XT. Please go ahead and type in the chat where you're from and what grades you're teaching, if you're a music teacher, so we can get to know you. I'm a classroom music teacher in New York City, and I have been following Anthony's work on Music XT for the past at least 2 years. I found it to be super helpful, whether I just need a quick exercise for specific music element or thing I'm teaching, just refresher, or maybe a completely new take on something that I teach. I teach K through 3, so I do Dalcroze with pre-K in my other school. I just use Dalcroze all the time, and Anthony not only gives me concrete advice. There's so many activities on Music XT, and also helpful reflections about philosophy of Dalcroze teaching and his thinking about, why Dalcroze. So yeah, I really recommend, if you aren't yet subscriber, go to Music XT. It's on substack.com and subscribe for free. The session notes for this event are posted there right now. And you will also be able to stay in touch with this community that way. I'll put the link in the chat for you. A few notes before we begin the session. If you have any questions or comments during the presentation, feel free to type them in the chat. If you're comfortable keeping your camera on, please do. That would be great. Some of the activities will be interactive, and it's just the best idea to see the faces. You might also be invited to move, so perhaps find a place where you could move. That would be great. Please keep your microphone muted at all times, unless otherwise directed. Many of you are already familiar with Anthony, and he's one of the leading presenters on Dalcroze pedagogy in the US. Over his 17 years in the classroom, he has developed a Dalcroze-based elementary music curriculum, which he shares regularly on Music XT. He currently holds positions at Carnegie Mellon University and Interlochen Summer Arts Academy, in addition to his public school teaching. His work appears on Quaver, GIA publications, the New Dalcrozian podcast, NAFME, Dalcroze Society of America, Virtual Dalcroze, and many other platforms. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Anthony Molinar.
Hey, thanks, Bogna. It's so nice to have Bogna here, a teacher of her experience and background as part of our Music XT community. It's such a gift to have so many strong people behind this work, working behind the scenes, and I'm very fortunate to know somebody like Bogna. So thank you, Bogna, for being here as well to support this meeting. So everybody's here. It's great. We have now we had like over 200 people register for this workshop. And typically the way that works is a lot of people will watch the video afterwards, and people might come in and out during the presentation as well, which is fine, which is expected. So I'm so glad that so many people were interested in talking about Dalcroze, and just kind of like sharing a little bit of my perspective and my experience using this work in a public school setting. I mean, that's my sort of wheelhouse. I've been in public schools, as Bogna said, for about 17 years, and in my teaching practice is, probably one of the most traditional Dalcroze classrooms you'll find in a public school. I do shoes off Eurythmics with all my grades, which is grades kindergarten through 5th, and it's every day shoes off, and it's so not I wouldn't say 100% what I do is coming from the Dalcroze tradition, but it's mostly Dalcroze. Now, I'm telling you that now, and I'm not necessarily advocating for that for you or for everybody. I really believe that Dalcroze principles can exist in a number of different capacities in our classrooms. And we're going to talk today about some real easy ways to start incorporating some of these really time-tested philosophies that are beautiful and very helpful, and talk about some really practical ways that you can start getting your students to benefit from this 100-year-old method. So actually, that's probably a great place to start. Let's talk for a second a little bit about the history. The Dalcroze method is the oldest of the pedagogical methods that are still used today. And I think sometimes people don't understand that. And so I like to talk a little bit about the history just briefly. So one of the words that we keep throwing around here is Dalcroze. You keep hearing it. We've said it already like a bunch of times. I'll type it in the chat just in case you haven't seen it before, although it has been on all of our correspondence. And the Dalcroze refers to a person. Okay, and this is Emile Jacques Dalcroze, who was a teacher in Switzerland in the beginning of the 20th century, end of the 19th century. And Emile Jacques Dalcroze developed a system for teaching music through the experience of movement. And it was, even for the time, especially for the time, was incredibly forward-thinking and progressive. And even nowadays, we haven't even quite caught up to it yet, I think. So he was far ahead of his time in thinking about music education and holistic education and a lot of different facets of it. And so the work that he used to use this movement to develop musical sensations, he called eurythmics, right? Which I'll type that one in the chat. So these are both words that you'll hear me use. Dalcroze being the person, and eurythmics being the work. Eurythmics, not the band in the 80s with Annie Lennox. That's not the Eurythmics we're talking about, although that is where the name comes from. Annie Lennox actually studied eurythmics at the Royal Academy in London, and liked the name and believed in the essence of the work and used that name eurythmics for what was an awesome band in the 80s that just got recently inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So Eurythmics is in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So I'm going to continue to say that and use it to promote my own work. So so Dalcroze Eurythmics has this over 100-year-old tradition, and it is, but I would say it is less commonly found to be used in our public school curriculums. It's not as often that you find somebody who really embraces Dalcroze pedagogy in their classroom, and I think there's some reasons for that, and we'll can kind of get into some of the misconceptions that people have about eurythmics. If you go on the Substack link and you find the session notes for this session, I have a poll question there, and I'm curious as to what people's preconceived conceptions are of what Dalcroze practice is. For instance, one of the things that people notice right away about our work is that we don't wear shoes. And in traditional Dalcroze practice, that's true. You wouldn't wear shoes, and there's some very good reasons for this. Perhaps we'll get into them later. But yes, you can still do it with shoes on, and many times you have to if logistics don't allow for it. If you can't take your shoes off, you can still do eurythmics. It's fine. You can still teach this way, even if you're not really in the mood to have a bunch of barefoot children tromping around your classroom. It's totally fine for you to teach it with the shoes on. It still works somewhat. Although I would argue maybe not quite as strong, it still works. There's a bunch of misconceptions about how much piano skills you have to have in order to teach this way, and just how much big body movement you really need to do. I mean, there are different degrees to which eurythmics is being able to be used. And I want to encourage you to, even if it's only this much, to find space in your curriculum to use Dalcroze principles. So let's talk a little bit about what those principles are, okay? We're gonna get into a few activities today that I think will help sort of crystallize in a way how these Dalcroze principles might work their way into your classroom practice. So let's see here. I think the best thing to do might be to do a little bit of movement. So let's start with an activity I think that everybody will enjoy. That's doesn't require too much space around you. So let's try this. Let's see here. I'm going to move into my space. I'll have to move my camera rig here and see if I can do it without dropping it everywhere. Oops. That's my thing is tangled here. Can everybody see me? Wonderful, 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 wonderful. So let's start with, this is an activity I just did with my kindergarten classes. We just had kindergarten orientation. So I had the opportunity to work with some kindergarten kids. And I start them off, this is one of the first activities I do with kindergartners. And I think it crystallizes a few things about Dalcroze practice that we can talk about. So the first thing I want you to do is take your hands and stick them in front of you like this. And I want you to wiggle your fingers. And do me a favor, get your fingers like really close to your camera so that we have just a bunch of wiggling fingers in the camera. Ah! And then pull them back a little bit. Good. Keep those fingers wiggling, 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 wiggling. Good. And then bring them in forward again. We can feel that. Oh, this doesn't work in the classroom, but it's great on the cameras. Okay, and then keep your hands straight in front of you. And then what I want you to do is just drop your arms and let them sort of flop, if you can. Yeah, try not to let them hit anything. If you can find enough space to do this, that would be great. So it starts here with the wiggle, and then I just want you to let your arms drop. Let them drop. And notice that after they drop, they sort of swing a little bit, and then they sort of come to a stop on their own. Try it again. Just see if you can get that sensation here, and I'll do something like this. And drop. There we go. Yeah, that's pretty good. Oh, yeah. Let them just kind of hang freely. Now, see if you can drop them at the same time as me. See if you can catch what to do. I'll get a little closer so you can see. See if you can drop them at the same time as me. Ready? It goes like this. Oh, yeah. Did you see? Yeah. I give a little bit of a lift before I drop it. Yeah, did you see that? That's a fun thing to do. Okay, good. Now, try this. After you drop them, see if you can let them kind of, I hit my own cymbals here. Let them swing and then kind of keep them swinging. So you can sort of establish a little bit of a beat. Yeah, that's pretty good. Try it again. We want to try to let them drop. Wait for me. Try to do it with me. And drop. Let them swing. And kind of keep them swinging. Right, very good. Now, this is the next move. I don't think you're going to be able to do it. It's tricky. Let's see if you can manage this one. So here's the move. Yeah, my whole room shook. I'll try it again. See if you can catch that move. Kindergartners love this. They'll go crazy for it. It does. Swing with me. Did you get it? Now the question I'll ask the kindergartners is I'll ask them, how did you know that I was about to jump? Could you predict when I was about to jump? And the kindergartners will kind of catch the drift. Oh, okay, yeah, I can see that. See if you can do it at the same time as me. See if you can follow along. We'll start with wiggle, and then we'll go with a swing. And then we'll jump. Very good. Yeah, very good. Yeah, that is good. Now, the fun thing to do here might be to call on somebody and we'll say, Kwanting, who's right over here. Kwanting, let's see if I can pin you to Spotlight. Spotlight for everybody. Here's Kwanting. Kwanting's going to lead the activity. Go ahead, Kwanting. Show us how to wiggle. Now show us how to swing. And then whenever you're ready, you're going to show us how to jump. Oh, that was excellent. Good. Yeah, now, yeah, that's good. Now let's see if I can unspotlight you. I'm not sure how to do that. Oh, remove spotlight. There we go. Thanks, Kwanting. Yeah, so the idea here is that we get that little swinging pattern. And then what I might do, if I can move this back over here, is I would say, now let's try it this way. Let's see if you can do this. Here's your wiggle. Good on that. Do you hear that swing? Oh, did you catch it? Back to the swing. on, Ting, I got you. All right, so all right, so let's just talk for a second about that activity. That was just a nothing activity. That took very little effort to do. What were we practicing? Type in the chat, what kind of things just in the course of that small activity could we find that we were practicing? What musical skills were we practicing? Okay, listening for contrast. Okay, good, steady beat. Anacrusis, CJ, very good. Yes, ensemble, beautiful. Anticipation, wow, yes, I love that. Charlotte, excellent answer. Yes, we got so many things in this little nugget of an activity where we did, like I said, we did nothing. I mean, there was nothing complex about it. And it took us, what, 4 minutes? Here, well, you would take longer with it with the kids, but yeah, the timing, the accuracy, the reaction time. Now, can you think about what or I don't want to say but what extra musical skills were practiced here? What did you practice here that was not necessarily musical, but maybe developmental or emotional? Or yes, there's awareness. Thank you, CJ. That's beautiful. That's a wonderful thing. Watching the teacher. Oh yeah, good. Yes, good. Excellent. You know, just the idea of breathing. Excellent. Matt would invite them to breathe. Not hitting anyone. Yes, this is good. We're going to talk about this in a second, Sarah. Thank you. Remind me, Sarah, if I don't say it. That's an excellent one. Coordination, timing, spatial awareness. Follow the director. Wow, look at these answers. And this was in a nothing activity. Like I said, this was not a complex activity. We swung our arms, and then we jumped. Focus and fun, yes. And we even had fun in our lame Zoom meeting here, where we're all at home. I saw you guys smiling. I saw Quan Ting smiling when I tricked her and she messed up and she jumped at the wrong time. And it was all, you know what? And Quan Ting made that mistake, but it wasn't embarrassing. It was fun. Oh, I got tricked. No big deal. We move on, right? So when we use movement in this way, there is a wonderful sort of loss of self-consciousness, okay? And it is a really inviting way to bring children into a musical experience in a way that doesn't put them in some sort of spotlight. It doesn't put them in some sort of microscope. It doesn't make them as self-conscious. And I find it so appealing in that way. If you start with a little movement activity, sometimes I see I follow all the music teacher Facebook groups, and I'm going to just gripe a little bit. Sometimes I'll hear teachers who are having classroom management issues, and they'll say, well, if you won't behave, we're not going to do the fun movement game at the end of class. Wow, you just really are shooting yourself in the foot, because the fun movement game is the thing that might keep them from misbehaving. If you're struggling with your classroom management, you should do twice as much movement and start it right at the beginning. Don't use it as some sort of carrot. Do my boring, every good boy does fine worksheet, and then maybe we'll do a fun movement game. Like, this is wrong. This is wrong. Like, the idea is we get you moving, we get you swept up in this experience, and then you can't help it, can't wait for the next thing that we're doing, right? So I get fired up about that kind of thing. But the way that movement invites the whole child to be engaged, there's nowhere to hide. I can tell who's participating and who's having a fun time. It's a very, very inviting way to be inclusive and to get full engagement from all our students. Now, so just a couple things on the execution of that. When I went to the piano and I improvised, look, this is the kind of improv I'm confident that most of you could figure out how to do with a couple of keys. It was not super tonal, just a little pattern here. You could do almost anything you wanted. You could just play any notes. You could be any notes you wanted. It would be fine. And then a jump, right? It doesn't even have to sound as good as mine did. Here could be your swing, and then here could be, that'd be fine. It could just be literally nothing. And that kind of improvisation, I'm telling you, when you improvise with your students, if you're not accustomed to it, if you improvise with your students, they will be so engaged because they can sense that what's happening is happening now. right? And it's not rehearsed, and it's so engaging for them. But if you're not comfortable with improv on Music XT, which you should be a subscriber to, if you're not, don't know why not, but if you're not, then you there's tons of videos that I put out of my improv that you can use to play along, right? And I think this this activity is somewhere in the archives on Music XT with a video that's got the improv on it that you can just do. So does it work well with the guitar? Bennett jumps in there, or Bennett, whoever that is. Yeah, and that's another thing I say. It can be a guitar, it can be a clarinet, it can be whatever instrument you think you can make something happen with. musicxt.substack.com. I'll put it back in the chat again if you missed the link the first time. Yeah, so I don't really so much advocate for the piano. I think the piano's got advantages in terms of instruction. It's got some things about it that make it good. Number one, I can play it while I'm watching the room. I can play it while I'm giving instruction. I don't have to look at the keys. I can play a melody and a harmony and a bass line. It can be like, really, really versatile in that way. But there's things about it that aren't as good. I can't get up and walk around and model with the students. I can't, I don't have expressive dynamics of, crescendos and decrescendos that you would have on other instruments. So there's some things about it that don't lend itself, that aren't the best. But what I do advocate for is improvisation. I think whatever instrument you're on, if you learn to improvise with it, that will make, I think Dalcroze teaching a little bit more palpable. But in absence of that, you can find recordings. And like I said, on Music XT, I put up my recordings of my own improv that you can use whenever you want. So that's an easy, super easy activity that you could do tomorrow, right? And then you can build on that and you can do different things with it. We could try different tempo. We could try different, jumping patterns. You can do it the next day and do it slightly differently, and it's super fun. And then I'll oftentimes have a song or something that's got jumping in it, and that will do just to kind of build on that. So some of the Dalcroze principles that are in play here that I think are important are that this idea in eurythmics is called time, space, and energy. Okay, so time, space, and energy is an important variable in eurythmics. And what this basically means is that whenever we are considering time, like the length of a note or the space between two notes, we also must consider space, which is how much space it takes up, right, through in the physical sort of manifestation of it, and then how much energy do we use on our way there. So that swinging gesture is not nothing. Did you notice how I started with that just drop of the arms as the base of the gesture? Now, this is an important thing that is very Dalcrozian that I think will help a lot of people who are trying to incorporate this. I start with the physical, okay? Many times I just start with the gesture, the physical gesture, and trying to get that right. The first thing I did is had you just articulate your fingers and mess around with space, and then that gesture of dropping the arms, letting them go dead and flop. Because there's a million different ways to interpret how to do that little arm swing, okay? If you just go, all right, let's just start swinging our arms in a tempo. If you skip to that level of it, I think you'll struggle. I don't think you'll get the same, experience, because what made it satisfying is that I taught the students to drop and swing and get this nice body motion happening where we had this momentum. There was time, space, and energy involved in the gesture, right? And so this is what I think is missing from a lot of people's movement sort of approach. So, obviously a lot of people are teaching movement all the time, and maybe, people are onto this in varying degrees, but what I think is very Dalcrozian about the way I do it is that I really believe that I really try to be very picky about the nature of the movement and making it expressive and eurythmic. So it's not enough to just sort of be swinging the arms in some sort of like, I'm swinging them, like that doesn't do it for me. We need to get the gesture right, and that is a little bit more, takes a little bit more practice than you might think. Okay, so like for instance, a common sort of paradigm in all music classes is that we're going to clap the rhythm. How many of you, raise your hand if you have students clap the rhythm? Yeah, okay, good, yes. It's pretty ubiquitous. I think even in the secondary, even in the ensemble world, clapping a rhythm is considered to be a very, a good way to experience rhythm. And they're not wrong, but I think that there's a couple things missing about the way that we clap rhythms that I think miss a little bit of the mark. And so I have this approach that I call the anti-clap, okay? And so like if we would clap a rhythm, let's just do a little something here. Let's say I'm gonna play a rhythm and I want you to clap it back. I'll play it, you clap it back. Here we go. And if you already have some rhythmics training, maybe you already know where I'm going with this, but just go ahead and clap the rhythm. I'll play it back. So if I went, okay, good. That's very nice. All right, good. And I see some excellent clap gestures out there. So I got some really good trained music teachers here. But the idea is that students will often clap the rhythm in this very sort of slappy, robotic way where the hands are right here in front. This is what we get. Or even worse, this one. This is what I get a lot, okay? And this is their default. I call it the sports clap. And then it's fine. We can go sports. It's fine. Sports clap. It's fine for sports. But this is not what we want, right? So I actually teach it this way. And this is how I arrive at a more musical clap. So I'll tell the students, take your hands, and you can do this with me. Take your hands and press them together as hard as you can. And really feel the tension here in your hands as you press them together. And then I want you to push them apart so that they sort of explode. And then float them back together, and it should make no sound. So it's a push and an explosion, and then a float back, and an explosion, and a float back, and an explosion, and a float back. And we get this sort of, and it actually doesn't make any sound at first. I'm fine with zero sound. What I want is this sort of explosion, and then this journey back to it. This is great. We could even try, we could do a nice tempo here, but again, we've got our explosions each time. We can do it different. We can do really big explosions. We can try different ways to do that. And now, what we want to do in order to make it a little bit, more conventional is instead of keeping your hands all the way together, just keep them about here. Just about like this distance. And then when you do your explosion, you are going to get a little sound. But the important thing is that it's floating back to about here before it explodes, right? So there we go. Yeah, that's good. So when I clap a rhythm in this way, if I want to go, all right, yeah. Right, excellent. So what I'm doing here is I'm thinking about, so in a sports clap, all of the energy, all of the attention is in the putting of the hands together. There's not a lot of consideration of space. Generally, you only use about this much space, right? And all of your energy is in this motion, right? Now, the thing that's interesting is that the moment that your hands touch, in musical terms, that's merely the attack of the note. You understand? That's the attack of the note. The rest of the note happens then. Does that make sense? And you're not considering it at all. When you attack and then you're done. But that's not really the way it is in music. In music, you attack and then sustain. Right? So the attack is the beginning of a note, it's an initiation, and then there's some kind of note. So what we want is we want to invert that paradigm. Instead of thinking about all the energy going to the attack, we want the energy to come after the attack. Does that follow? So when I would clap a rhythm this way, right? I'm getting a little bit more of a musical attack. And then I invite the children to experiment with space. Don't just clap in one place. Try to find a different point to clap, right? And try to move it around. It's a little harder on Zoom, but I try to keep it alive and in motion, and we try to find different places to put those claps so that it works. But we don't want this is not the thing, right? And they'll still default to this, and you have to remind them, no, we don't want the sports clap, we want the music clap, or I call it, oh, we want the anti-clap, which is the opposite of a clap. It's it's like a clap in reverse, right? And so this is just a very, very simple change in a very conventional music education, modality, clapping a rhythm. Okay, well, in a Dalcrozian perspective, we're going to think about time, space, and energy. We're going to think about that gesture as being like a little bit more important. And so we're going to say, we're actually going to spend some time to teach you how to clap, right? And I don't know what other teachers do, but my suspicion is that like it's maybe not viewed to be a worthwhile venture to spend half of a class just teaching your kids how to clap. But for me, this is really, really important because it makes everything so much more musical and expressive. And then it just creates a musical sensation. And when they clap a rhythm, it's so much more joyful and it's so much more expressive instead of just this like, plus then they don't rush as bad. When you think about all the space that a note takes up, you tend to, give it its due. It internalizes the music a little bit more. It's a lovely thing. So I kind of want to diverge for just a second and talk a little bit about why I think this work is worth incorporating in your curriculum or in any curriculum. So, I teach a number of different places. I teach at a public school, and the public school I teach at is just a regular public school. It's not some school for the gifted, or it's not a school, in some, privileged enclave. It is a very fair cross-section of populations, of socioeconomic demographics. And I also teach at Carnegie Mellon, in which I teach, these are children who are quite gifted, and are in what they call the preparatory academy at Carnegie Mellon, which is, these are, quite gifted students, and I teach them on Saturdays, Eurythmics. And then in the summers, I'm fortunate to teach at the Interlochen Summer Arts Academy, where I teach them students who are quite gifted, and all ages too. So high school, middle school, and elementary school age children. But some of these children are quite gifted. And I use Eurythmics in all these contexts. And I find it to be incredibly valuable, but for different reasons. Okay, so let's start with the Interlochen students who will come to me generally with some significant training in music, right? They come to me with a very, with a pedigree of training, and some of them are advanced on their instrument. And I find that this work offers them an opportunity to think about music from a slightly different angle, as opposed to from the angle that they're accustomed to. So if a child is accustomed to a more conservatory training, this is a way to think about music somewhat differently from a feeling perspective, right? Oftentimes these children are thinking music very strongly, but many times they are not quite embracing the feeling of music. And this work allows them to come at music letting go of a lot of the thought process that they are holding on to, clinging to very desperately, and to just allow it to flow. And this is a huge revelation to them. So in conjunction with their traditional, I'm not telling them not to think about, music in the way that their teachers are telling them. I'm just adding to their possibilities by saying, you could just kind of feel your way through that. And it's a really, really valuable tool for them, right? Now in the public school, we don't have that same situation, right? But sort of reverse engineering that, the children learn how to feel music very strongly, in which is, their default, actually. If I find it interesting that if you're not trained otherwise, the children connect to music through feeling, much, much more strongly. That connection comes first, and then we can build on that layers of literacy and understanding and theory and instrumental technique and all of these things that are going to make them successful as musicians. But it's feeling first. So whether or not this idea of musical sensation is the primary first exposition to it, or in addition to an already sort of existing approach to music, it is a very, very valuable and powerful modality for them to develop. So I think if you are teaching in a more traditional or an ORF classroom or a Kodai classroom, this work adds a little dimension that you can totally integrate in any way that you want. In any way, you can just add it a little bit as a warm-up, as just a way to expose them to that. You can also just think about a way to integrate a little bit of eurythmic movement into something you're already doing. And it's very easy to see how that infects not the right word, but enhances your teaching style all the time, if you can kind of connect to that sensation. All right, we're doing great so far. We're going to go about 10 more minutes here, and then we're going to do some Q&A. So get your questions. Let's do some more movement. That was fun, and I want to do something else with that. Let's do that. Let's see here. I'm going to move into a better space. Oops. Let's do, this is one I've been kicking around for a while, and it kind of relates to the swinging one we did. So we'll do this one here. This is called heavy bottom circles, and here's how it works. So take your hand, put it up in the air this time. This one I might do this one with more like second grade, third grade, something like that. Hand up in the air like this, and when you drop the arm this time, I want you to sort of let it float over the top, and you're going to sort of make this circle, right? You're going to make this circle motion. Now, not all Dalcroze activities have to do with dropping your arm and feeling the weight of that, but these two do. Very good, yeah. So you're going to feel this arm circle, and just really make sure that it drops and then floats in the top. It's a drop, right? Yeah. I would probably have practiced just that drop a few times in getting that motion. Try the other arm too, so you can get that. Feel like the drop and the float, and feel it really hit the bottom and turn around. Now let's try it with some music and see if you can find the heavy bottom circle. So if we did it like something like, let's go, we'll sorry. There we'll go. Very nice, good. Now, same idea, but this time we're going to articulate that circle at the elbow. So what you're going to do here is the circle drops, and it kind of just, you draw it at the elbow here, and it's the same thing, but make sure it drops and kind of comes around. So we got, I'll do it goes like that. Here we go. Now let's go back to the arm circle. Here we go. Now the elbow circle. Back to the arm. And the elbow. Good, now the next circle is at the wrist. And it's the same thing. Make it nice and floppy and make it bounce and come and go to the top, like about here we go. Now to the elbow. Arm. Elbow. Wrist. Yeah, good. Now, I didn't tell you to switch, but a lot of you heard that it switched, and you switched with me. Could you tell when it switched? This is a great lesson for children. All right there. Oh, I heard that it switched. Oh, what was it that it switched? I didn't need to tell you. You just heard, oh yeah, this one goes like this, and that one goes like this, right? And we could go bigger. We could go with what I call the body circle, which is like, I say, like flop down and like dust off your toes, and then come all the way back up, and you get this like. That's fun to do, and then you could do it. You could do it even smaller. I call it the finger circle, when I kind of go like this. Back to the wrist, and the elbow. That's fun. So, there's a lot about that activity to like. And now there's so many different things you can do with it. Like, for instance, with my interlocking students, what I would do is I would tell them, okay, with one arm, I want you to do the elbow, and with the other arm, do the wrist. See if you can get both of them going at the same time. Oh, that's a fun challenge, And then when I say switch arms, right? So you go switch, right? You want to be able to do that and kind of get both of those levels going. And feel that. Or you could do it with the arm and then the wrist, and like they get in these like different size circles and like trying to get them to line up and feel the difference between the two levels. And then we can do all different things with the circles in terms of, so another thing that's valuable to do with the circles is if you're singing a song, there's multiple options for what level you might feel that beat at, right? You might say, does this song sound like, if I, whatever. Or wouldn't it be nice to feel that one go? Right? Wouldn't it be nice? Or even yada yada yada. Isn't that nice? Right? Doesn't it feel nice to kind of change up that? So if you've established a thing in your room where you're like, we're doing different beat levels and we're feeling with these circles, and we're making sure that we're really articulating those in a way that feels like something, you can bring that back in the context of preparing for your concert or rehearsing repertoire, and you can say, hey, look, oh yeah, remember that? That was like, we're going to feel that about here. Let's do our wrist circles together, and let's do that. I love that way to sort of embrace that, that energy of that bottom. Now somebody earlier, I think it was CJ, said anacrusis, which is like a great word, right? So, in eurythmics practice, we'll sometimes talk about something I call the Krusic cycle. The Krusic cycle. I'm going to write it. Krusic cycle. Okay. The Krusic cycle is this sort of journey that goes from heaviness to lightness, and then momentum builds you back to the heaviness. And we find the Krusic cycle in all different things. For instance, we might find it in a meter. Like you might feel a meter as as having this crucis, which is the heavy part, and then what we call metacrucis, which is sort of the journey, sort of the retreat from the crucis that builds back up, and then the anacrucis, which is that downward motion that heads back to the beat. Well, sometimes it's called the upbeat, but I think that anacrusis actually feels downward. It feels like momentum moving down. So it's a little bit counterintuitive. Sometimes you call it like the upbeat or the beat 4, but it's not really up. It's actually traveling down towards the crucis. So that's why I think that circle image is so musical, because it's this idea of, here's our crucis. When we hit the bottom, we can actually feel that. It really feels like something. Pow. And then we have this little metacrucis where we sort of have to travel a little bit until we build up enough momentum to head back to the beginning again. And the children just get this intuitively, and it just makes for a musical performance. So whether or not it's the meter or a rhythm or a long note or a phrase has a crucic cycle, right? Doesn't it generally have this like feeling to it? There's a lot of this idea of heaviness and lightness. And we can make that physical so easily. It's in fact, I don't even know why you would bother explaining it to a third grader, when they can just feel it, right? And later on, someday somebody will say, hey, did you ever notice that, blah, blah, blah? And they'll say, oh, yeah, that is true. But it doesn't really matter if I never use the word crucic cycle with my classes. I mean, and I would never burden them with this information. But we do talk about, where's the heavy beat? Where does it feel heavy? Oh, okay, right there, that's our strong beat, that's our heavy beat. How big is our circle here as we're traveling? Oh, okay, we can kind of feel that. And so this is another, I'll leave you with this to kind of, maybe I shouldn't, but I'm going to tell you anyway. So if that piques your attention, but so this is an Anthony thing. This is not necessarily a Dalcroze thing. So I know this is like intro to Dalcroze, and a lot of the stuff that I'm showing you is definitely like every Dalcroze teacher that I know would back me up on it. But in this particular thing, this is just me. Is I actually really try not to use numbers in my class. And I try to avoid saying them at all, ever. Anytime I say a number, I try to think to myself, is there a way I could do this without saying a number? And I really try to discourage my students from counting. And I don't want to say discourage, I just try to find them a different way to think about it. I feel like counting is sometimes a little bit of a crutch, right? It's a little bit of a way to think about it and analyze it in a way that's not really actually musical. So like, I would rather that they just felt the size of the circle and not necessarily be thinking about it in terms of, oh, it's 1, 2, 3, 4. Like they can just feel, oh, this is the length of that sort of crucic cycle, right? And then connect to that. Later on, like I said, like late elementary, 4th grade, 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade, I'm a little more permissive with the numbers. I think it's appropriate at a certain point. And certainly when they get into their secondary band program or their intermediate band program, the band director is going to be counting, and that's going to be what they're going to be exposed to it. And it's a great, tool for getting the result that they want. But I'm trying to instill in them a feeling that I'm trying to embed musicality in a different part of their brain, to activate a different part of their brain than that analytical sort of like following the patterns of it way. And I've had great success with this approach. And now I'm not telling you not to have your kids count. So please don't take it that way. This is my goofy, weird thing that I'm experimenting with. And maybe, there's some times where you might be like, really, is counting this necessary? And maybe you can experiment with that. So great. So we have like about 10 minutes left. And so I'd love to turn it over to you guys for some questions or comments or criticisms or whatever else is on your mind. I think probably with this many people, putting them in the chat is probably the easiest thing. But if you want to put your hand up, like your virtual hand up, maybe we'll call on you and you can just read it out. We don't have that many people, actually. 41's not huge. Great. Any great first day movement that you love? Oh, great question, Laura. Well, actually, I posted a bunch of stuff. If you go to that Substack article, I'm going to put it up here again. If you go to, actually, I don't know if I think I posted it. It's called The First 3 Classes. Oops, I typoed that. My keyboard struggles. musicxt.substack.com. Here we go. Dalcroze name games. Oh my gosh, yeah. So that article that I just mentioned, Jody, is called "The First Three Classes." Let me double check and make sure it's up there in the show notes or in the session notes. It's called "The First Three Classes." Yeah. So in that first three classes article is a name game, is some classroom management stuff, is all of that information. And so I'm not going to repeat all that right here because you can go in there and read that. And so the classroom management stuff is a huge piece of it. But I also just posted just today a great brand new first day movement game that I'm using. It's called Walk With Me and Stop. So here's the thing. Here's what I'll say about it. You can go on the Substack and see all of those articles, and you should definitely do that. But I'll say this. My plan in the first few days is so much about setting up the movement routines and setting up the good habits for movement so that we'll have success later. I'm not so interested in necessarily like nailing down all these concepts. I'm trying to get them to do some things like interact positively with each other, follow directions, learn when to stop. I have all kinds of cues, my sit down song. I need to condition them so that whenever they hear that, they just sit down, right? So if I'm ever in the middle of an activity, at the end of the activity, I just go, and they just drop because it's Pavlovian. I've got them conditioned, right? And I have a stand-up song, and I've got all these things, and I'm just really trying to ingrain them with all of these things. Procedures for my class about taking off your shoes and how we're going to do that. But if you don't have that, that's fine. But that classroom management stuff, that's the first few lessons. And there's a bunch of games that I do that help with that. One of them is called Walk With Me and Stop, which is basically an idea of how do I move through space on my own, and then how do I find my own path through the space, and how do I listen for directions, and how do I make sure I got that right. And that when they lock in and they do that, it's incredibly powerful. So yeah, and so my classroom management work is really important to me, Nicole. I'm glad you asked that. I've given a few workshops. One's called music-driven classroom management. I've got this new concept I'm calling beautiful classroom management, which is like basically the idea is that music is our superpower as teachers. And as I mentioned earlier, the cure for a lot of classroom management issues is really, really good music teaching, because music is this calming force, it's this engaging force. And if we're really making our class musical, like making the procedures musical end to end, it really is effective. So I've got a bunch of stuff about that posted on there. I'll talk about solfege. There was somebody talked about next steps, learning more about Dalcroze. So Linda, I'm not sure, but the number one thing you do is subscribe to my Substack, because that's going to be where you're going to stay in touch with a lot of these concepts. I'm giving you a lot of information there on things like that. But there's some great training centers I recommend. In fact, that's going to be the topic of conversation on our meeting on the 27th on our team. The team is the Totally Effortless Approach to Musical Movement, which is sort of the upgraded version of the Substack, upgraded version of the Music XT. The whole topic on that meeting is going to be about Dalcroze training. There's going to be a ton of information for people who are trying to make choices about that. I know Bugna has been talking about her next steps with training too, so that's a great thing. But I totally going to a summer training center is like a great idea, and you should definitely do that, because that's like really where you're going to pick up a lot of this stuff. And there's some stuff that happens during the year in the United States. I mean, there's not a ton of options, but I can definitely help you navigate that. So definitely get in touch with me. Solfege in Dalcroze is great. Dalcroze has its own solfege method that is really, really interesting. And again, believe it or not, uses movement. I'm actually presenting at the Ohio Music Educators Conference in February. I don't know if anyone here's Ohio. I'm presenting 3 workshops at the OMEA this year. I would like whatever they're calling the featured presenter. So I'm doing, one of them is going to be on Dalcroze solfege. So you should definitely come to that. Oh, I recognize Daniel. Daniel, were you at the Kent State workshop? Yeah, I remember you, buddy. Good to see you. And so, yeah, that's awesome. And let's see. Oh, CJ's in Ohio. Good. Okay. A. Bennett, are Dalcroze activities possible when there isn't a ton of floor space? The short answer is absolutely. So yeah, I think there's a lot you can do sitting in a seat. There's a lot you can do standing in a spot. Um, can you do all the stuff? Maybe not. There's certain things that wouldn't be safe to do. Skipping in a big circle or something, is like, you need a lot of room for that. Maybe that's not the Dalcroze activity you're going to be able to do. But, just even like incorporating these sort of like hand gestures in a musical way is a big step in the right direction. Jumping in place, leaning is a good thing that we do. I do a lot of like swaying and leaning. And then you can certainly do things maybe sometimes in smaller groups. I know when I've taught in rooms when I had to push into a cart for a while, and I would have like 5 kids at a time do something while we watched and then switch it out and do 5 more kids. There's a lot of things you can do with limited space. So yeah, great. And again, I'm talking about this kind of stuff all the time. This is like till I'm blue in the face. More questions? Anybody got anything interesting to offer? I'm getting my phone is blowing up here.
Anthony, what is your favorite Dalcrozian exercise? Or like what would be, let's say, some teachers want to learn more and they come to your class, and what would you show? Like what would be the first thing that you would go to show Dalcroze in action?
One of my favorite activities to start the year with, and I do it usually in maybe my 3rd or 4th class, is my balloon time activity, which involves just tossing a balloon. And it's, again, something that works with real limited space. But it's such a powerful activity that the kids love, and it's so fun to watch the way that they find the different, they have to judge the height of the balloon. It's on the Substack, but that if I have a go-to activity, that's probably the one I'm most famous for, is my balloon time thing. So check that one out. But that's a winner. And I'll tell you this, like if you do an activity like that at the beginning of the year, it's so fun that it buys you a lot of trust with the kids. If you do a bunch of really, really fun front-loaded activities like that at the beginning of the year, later on, if you decide to do something weird and trippy and it doesn't they don't quite understand what's happening, they'll tend to trust you and be like, oh yeah, you know what? That does, it's probably going to go somewhere cool. It's probably going to work out. So that's a great question. I've now changed my room to set up to move more because, Kayla took my workshop in Durham. Hi, Kayla in Durham. That was a great workshop. That was one of the best ones I ever gave. Good to see you, Kayla. And then Jody, I was listening to this outside, and when you were playing piano, the wild birds and all the trees started to respond. That's awesome that you said that, Jody. I actually was given a workshop at Interlochen for the faculty, and it was in this beautiful room, and I was like, it was a weird workshop because there was faculty from all different departments there. There was like dancers there and music faculty and theater faculty and creative writing faculty and some people from the front office who weren't it was a weird sort of mix of people, and I was a little bit not sure what direction to take it. Like your rhythmics can go a lot of different ways, and I was sort of in my head, and all of a sudden it started to thunderstorm outside, and you could hear the thunder and you could hear the rain patting on the ceiling, and I just let go and I just started playing with the rainstorm. I just started like incorporating the rhythms of the rain and the wind in my improv, and it just like changed the whole vibe of the room. It was just so great. So I think when we open up our awareness to the beautiful natural world, the music that's happening all around us, it's like profound. And I find I'm very free to do that in Eurythmics. So you guys were awesome. This was great. It's 8 o'clock. I'm very conscious of everybody's time. You guys are amazing. I think Bogna's got some closing stuff to say, so stick around. But I really appreciate it. And I look forward to interacting with all of you.
Yay. Thank you, Anthony. And thank you, everyone, again, for coming to the workshop and for joining the community at Music XT. We'll put, again, link in the chat, again, for everyone to make sure you click and stay tuned for the recordings and the notes of the workshops. Anthony always puts it there. So all the materials are there for you to watch in the future. I also would like to invite you to join Totally Effortless Approach to Music Movement. Musical movement, or the team for short. This is on Music XT, and just for $10 You can have access to the archive of all the posts from the past and future. And Anthony posts a lot of materials, which is a goldmine really of Dalcroze based lessons and ideas. So there's the way to start. You also can come to monthly Zoom meetings in which we discuss and share even more about the work. Most of the team members get their administration to pay for it. So if you're looking for a deeper experience, you can upgrade your subscription at any time. We have a team meeting next week, August 27th, in which we'll discuss more topics around Dalcroze training and how it differs from other methods. Dalcroze approach is very personal and fulfilling journey, and I hope you'll stay in touch with us as we learn from one another and support each other. So have a great night, everyone. Thank you for coming, and Anthony will look for more from you.
Thanks, folks. Thank you guys so much for coming. It really meant a lot to me, and I look forward to it. And thanks again to Bogna. Thanks to my team members here. Kathy is here. Quan Ting is here. I'm not sure who I'm missing, but I'm so good to see everybody. And Daniel's here from that workshop. So many familiar faces. I'll see you guys soon.